The Shah dynasty, China's first dynasty and possibly the most controversial. Did it really exist, or is it just an Asian legend? Today, let's talk about this mysterious dynasty. Before Shah, China was home to many independent tribes, loosely organized into a tribal alliance. A supreme leader was chosen to coordinate common foes rather than to rule with absolute power. The leader was valued for virtue and ability rather than bloodline, and succession was based on that as well. Shah broke that rule. For the first time, power was passed from father to son. The Chinese call this 家天下, the family rules all under heaven. The system lasted from Shah all the way to the fall of the Qing dynasty in 1912. Dynasties would rise and fall, but within each dynasty, power stayed in the family. This is exactly why Shah is considered the first dynasty. We will return to the story in a moment. But first, here's an awkward fact. Archaeologists have not yet fully confirmed Shah's existence. Why? Because no writing from the Shah period has ever been found. For comparison, the next dynasty, the Shang, left us oracle-bone inscriptions over 150,000 pieces, with about 4,500 distinct characters identified. Yet across all of them, the word Shah never appears or recognized in any form. So, where does our knowledge of Shah come from? Almost entirely from texts written over 1,000 years after Shah, like the Book of Documents and records of the Grand Historian. These texts carry historical memory, but inevitably mix in later editing, imagination, and political construction. With only later texts and no contemporary written records, Shah remains hard to fully verify. Yet, even without writing, we do have one extremely important discovery, an archaeological site called Erlitou, currently the most likely candidate associated with Shah. Erlitou lies near Luoyang in central China, dating to roughly 1750 to 1500 BCE, exactly matching the late Shah period in the texts. So, what's there? It has China's earliest palace city, about 100,000 square meters, at the heart of a much larger site, roughly the size of 400 football fields. In the palace city, archaeologists also found the earliest mature bronze workshops, producing ritual vessels that were markers of elite power, likely made under centralized control. The site also revealed sharply stratified tombs, indicating a clear class society, and it produced an exquisite dragon figure made of over 2,000 turquoise pieces, the earliest mature image of the Chinese dragon. Creating such an object required immense labor and coordination, pointing to a state-level organization. So, in terms of chronology, scale, and cultural complexity, Rarlito meets every criteria of an early dynasty. This is why Chinese archaeologist Xu Hong calls it the earliest China. But still, without any inscription bearing the word Shah, scholars can't directly equate Erlitou with Shah. The puzzle may only be solved by future discoveries. Now, back to the story of how Shah began. According to legend, before Shah, there was an era called the Five Emperors, five wise rulers who succeeded one another. The three most famous were Yao, Shun, and Yu. According to tradition, power passed not by bloodline but by merit. Yao gave the throne to Shun, a man of great virtue, and Shun gave it to Yu, who had tamed the floods. When his time came, Yu followed the tradition and named Bo Yi as his successor. But the one who truly broke the tradition was Yu's son, Qi. After his father's death, Qi seized the throne from Bo Yi, defeated the tribes that opposed him, and established the principle of father to son. The age of dynasties had begun. But the story of noble merit-based succession likely contains heavy idealization. Why? Because it survives mainly in Confucian texts. Confucianism later became the dominant state ideology in China, and its scholars had a strong tendency to portray the distant past as a moral model to admonish current rulers. In fact, a completely opposite version exists. The Bamboo Annals, a chronicle unearthed from a royal tomb of the Warring States period, roughly 1,000 years after the Shah, records that Shun imprisoned Yao and seized the throne, and that Yu later exiled Shun and took the throne himself. Pretty dark, huh? The truth probably lies somewhere between the two, though we may never know. But regardless of what really happened, one name remains a household word in China today: Yu the Great. Temples dedicated to him can still be found in many parts of China, and his story begins with a great flood. Legend says the Yellow River overflowed and floodwaters covered everything. Yu spent 13 years taming the waters. It's said he passed his own home 3 times without ever going in. This achievement won him enormous prestige. This isn't unfounded legend. A Western Zhou bronze vessel from nearly 3,000 years ago, roughly 1,000 years after Shah, boasts an inscription clearly recording Yu's flood control deeds. So by that time, Yu's story was already being recorded and taken seriously as history, and archaeologists have found large-scale flood traces in the Yellow River basin from around 4,000 years ago, an astonishing match with the legendary timing. In short, the story of Yu is likely rooted in real events. In taming the floods, Yu brought the tribes together like never before. Taming the Yellow River required coordinating upstream and downstream, mobilizing tens of thousands of workers, and building lasting command structures. The massive organization upgrade laid the foundation for centralized power, and once Qi seized the throne, it became much easier for power to stay within the family. Father and son in 2 generations complete the transition from tribal alliance to dynastic state. Some scholars even propose a more calculated scenario. While Yu publicly named Bo Yi as his successor, he may have been quietly building his son's influence in the background all alone, so that when the moment came, Qi already had the support he needed to take power. However it happened, Shah lasted around 470 years. Its final ruler, Jie, is described as extravagant and cruel, killing his ministers and exploiting his people. He was eventually defeated by the rising Shang tribe, the first dynastic transition in Chinese history. From then on, the script of righteous founder, tyrannical last ruler would replay across Chinese history for thousands of years to come. So that's Shah, a dynasty sitting between myth and history. Next time we'll talk about Shang, a dynasty truly confirmed. From this episode on, I'm starting a series that walks through each Chinese dynasty in turn. If that sounds interesting, be sure to follow along. See you next time.